What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today is a day I've been waiting on for a very long time because yes, we did get some mail in finally. Today we actually get to not only install some turbos on our VG, but we're actually going to install an oil pan and officially get this thing sealed up and no longer exposed to any dust or debris. That's super exciting for me because I've got a pretty active shop and sometimes it's a little nerve-wracking messing with stuff when you got to worry about things like that. But here is our NATT VG. It's got some 40p heads. We went ahead and had them recut, refreshed, tanked, and all that, so they're brand new. We've got us some Nismo 740s, and today we get to install some turbos and a bunch of other goodies like turbo lines, feeds, manifolds. And we've got these nice brand new beauties. Stock manual turbos, I'm pretty sure. Nope, they're actually auto, so there's going to be more of a boost feel with these instead of having power directly on demand. We've also got us a couple other things: EGR delete, coolant temp sensor, bunch of hoses, and we got all of our turbo gaskets and goodies. So we're pretty much going to get this thing ready to drop in, maybe with the exception of the plenum. And well, we did kind of pre-record, or not pre-record, but we recorded this video previously and nothing went to plan. So I'll show a couple of them clips here as I kind of explain what's going on. But there is actually oil check valves here in your NA block that you have to remove to plug when you're using a twin turbo oil tree. So these are the check valves that we remove out of the block. You kind of just break the tip to get the ball and spring out with a flathead screwdriver, and then you can use a slide hammer to kind of get back, grab behind the valve. It is much easier if you tap it in to allow some of the material to go in so your slide hammer can actually grab onto something. If not, it's pretty flush with the material of the block. So you got to remove those to plug them because the valves are actually in the oil tree. However, we were provided the wrong plugs that are actually the plugs for the other oil galleries on the back and front of the block. They went in really easily. As you see right here, it just popped in instead of having any bit of like interference fit. So then we had to drill them out, tap them, pull them, and then we had to flush and clean everything out of there. And this is where we are today. We have pretty much a fresh slate, so I'm comfortable to go ahead and start this job. These are the actual plugs that you use. They're 5/8 oil tree or plugs, but these are the ones I had. You can see there's significantly more taper. Well, they're definitely not as wide. I got lucky and tapped them without drilling through. Reusable. Let's flip this thing over and get it to where we can start to clean the block up in preparation to install our oil pan that we have over here. Almost complete unobtainium now, unless you make one with your NA pan. So let's flip her around. Voila! Everything looks pretty nice under here and pretty nice and clean. This old crusty seal shoots and he misses. Alright, so pretty much we're just cleaning up this mating surface here, and we've got us a little bit of Nissan liquid gasket to use. You could use the right stuff, the stuff that cures in like an hour, 2 hours, or whatever, 90 minutes. Kind of like Honda Bond in a nutshell. It just bonds really good and it goes perfect in any oil or gear box or oil applications, you know. Gear oil is what I meant to say. It's always so satisfying scraping an iron block with a razor. No worry about gouging it. Just direct it all to fall outwards and you're good. Now we just got everything cleaned and ready. Got the seal, little RTV'd up on each side. So that way when we push it into place, it makes a nice seal in that corner and fills all those gaps. Perfect. Now let's do the same for the rear, and then we can begin to prep our oil pan. So when you run your bead, run it on the inside of the bolts. I do still kind of smudge a little bit outward so it gets enough squish on the backside to ensure that even for whatever reason, if it gets past that through here on the edges, that there's enough to seal. I also kind of wipe it here on the sides about to this point, about an inch down or so. Keep your dipstick out until you get your oil pan fully installed. If not, you're in for a bad time. Trust me. Seal number 2. Before you put your pan on, you want to measure the gap that you have between your pickup and your oil pan. Everything's good. I did a couple checks. I don't have putty on hand, but like Play-Doh or silly putty is ideal because you can sit it there, put the pan on, see how much it smushes down, and you know about how much of a gap that you got. You don't want this to be literally sucking directly off the bottom of the oil pan, or you risk oil starvation, and well, we all know how that goes. So we did a couple tests. We did RTV, and another one was like assembly lube or grease. It stays pretty consistent, and we're pretty good here on our clearance. So as we lower our oil pan down onto the engine, we're basically just going to be watching the bolt holes as we lower it down, keeping it lined up. Once you get it directly straight on, you can kind of push it down. Now, I just do a little push, and then I start to thread all my bolts in. So here it says to let it sit about 10 minutes finger tight before you torque it. So we're literally just going to hand tighten them all with a extension and a 10 mil to kind of squish it all around. 10 minutes later, we'll tighten it down fully hand tight. And as we go back, we're going to skip every other bolt. I like to go wipe all that excess bead out of the edge so I can kind of seal between the block and the pan itself. It's a little secondary or backup just in case something's wrong. But I will say every time I've used this Nissan gasket, I've never had a leak. Alright, now we get to install some turbos. Yay! Probably the whole reason you guys are here. So we're actually going to start over here on the driver's side, and the first thing you may notice is we have no exhaust studs. Well, on this side, you actually have to flip-flop these center studs to accommodate the twin turbo manifold, as the NA is the complete opposite. We actually don't have any here because they came out with the nuts when we removed them, so we'll reinstall them as a whole, but we're going to show you guys how to flip-flop these studs with the double nut method. So the double nut method is pretty self-explanatory. You're going to double up nuts on the stud, basically so you can tighten one against the other, and then you can use that bottom nut to back out the stud, since you want to get a higher torque rating between the two nuts than the stud has in the actual head. To do this, I'm just going to drop a closed in wrench down here, and we're going to let that work its way against the stud so we can tighten the top nut. And now all we have to do is grab a hammer or mallet, and we're going to hit this 14 mil wrench, and it should crack that loose. Give it a little love tap. That actually wasn't bad at all. But you see as we spin the bottom one, it's spinning the top nut too. And pretty much when you get to this point, you can just take your ratchet, remove that stud just like it was a bolt. Just like that, we have double nutted the center studs. Easy as that. Let's get us a couple studs ready so we can at least mount it on to then use the bolts. We went ahead and put our gasket on. I took advantage of us not having any studs so I could just slip it into place. If not, this dipstick kind of gets in the way. We did clean up all of our mating surfaces so it's as prepped as it can be on install, and we hit this with a wire wheel or a wire brush just to kind of clean it up. Now this is the EGR port side. Now we just kind of lay our manifold in place. In the factory service manual, the torque spec says 17 to 20 foot-pounds. So we're actually going to kind of tighten the inside, or at least the center, and we're going to work our way outwards. And then we're actually going to go grab some heat shields because Matt actually wants to run them, keep it as stock as possible, and obviously to keep some of the heat down. There should be a couple 10 mils that hold these on. And on the driver's side, there's only 3, but on the passenger side, there's actually 4 bolt holes. Now that we got that all tightened up, we're actually ready to mount the turbo. So before we mount the turbo, there's one thing we have to remove over here, and that is this 14 mil little plug right here. This is actually the exact same thing as your drain bolt for your oil pan. So this is actually where one of your banjo bolts go for your turbo oil feed lines. So now you got a spare drain bolt if you need it. So before we drop the turbo on, we kind of have to pre-assemble it. So before we do that, we're actually going to place this exhaust gasket in place. And I'm actually going to do this upside down so I don't have to lift it up. I can just let gravity do its thing. Kind of an easier way to do this. Now I'm also doing this way because while it's upside down and I have full access right here to the oil drains, I'm actually going to feed oil into the turbo right here before I put the drains on and connect them to the oil pan. So I can kind of pre-lube the turbo before we put it in. We're still going to pull the plugs and everything and crank it over and build some oil pressure so we can prime the turbos, make sure that they're all lubricated and we're not going to have any premature damage or wear on them. So here are our nice new turbos, brand new center housings. They have a freshly, I guess probably vapor blasted front and rear housings. They also came with oil drain gaskets. So we're going to use these instead of the OEM ones, just to make sure that, you know, everything works as it should. So we're going to have 2 turbo water lines over here on this side, I guess per turbo. So we're going to kind of do those last. I want to get my oil lines out first and kind of get them mocked up so I know where to put it before we put the turbo on. Now odds are this is going to be the really long one because on the opposite side it's just got a loop back here instead of all the way up here. I'm going to assume that the elbow is going to go to the turbo as well. So this is going to go on the top side. So it's got a fitting that we'll put in it before we fully install this, but this comes to the back and you can loop it down and you have a banjo fitting right here that's going to connect via your banjo bolt. I forgot, make sure you get thrust bearing turbo lines for stock turbos or ball bearing if you have ball bearing. They need to be to suit because there's a correct restrictor in each set of lines for the right turbo. So there is like one way to do all this because the threads are different. It's fine and coarse. Eyelet, I don't know the correct term, but that's going to go up here to the block. And then this one is going to be what goes to the actual turbo. And then this is the little joining fitting that's actually going to thread into the turbo. This is the turbo side, this is the line side, because if you look in the line, not only are the threads specific, but this actually fits into the end of here. So we're going to remove the turbo and install our fitting. Got a 15 mil wrench to tighten it the rest of the way in. Don't got to go crazy tight. It's like a pipe fitting. It's just pretty snug. After a little bit of trial and error, once you thread this in first, it doesn't really work. It kind of has to be together. So you have those threads joined down so this thing, the shoulder on this will go past the flange down here. So now we made it short enough that we can finally thread this fitting in. So we're just gonna have to do this nice and slowly until we can get this elbow to drop below that exhaust flange right here. After a lot of persuasion later, we got it on. You kind of got to round the top off here and kind of just force it. It'll feel snug and you'll think you're stripping it. Obviously verify and don't actually strip it, but it took us a couple tries there. Now we can finally tighten that bottom fitting down. So we're not going to tighten this fitting here on top yet until we know roughly where we want it so we can get it positioned and then tighten it to keep it there. So now we've got the line ran towards the back and we're going to loop it around up here behind the dipstick. And then up here we're going to get a banjo bolt and one of our crush washers. You only need the K bolt. One of these has a K on it and the other one does not. The other one is much larger. It's almost like your power steering banjo bolt. So here, got the brand new crush washer, old crusty one. We're just gonna clean the inside of the bolt and make sure it's not collected any debris over the years. Then we'll put that crush washer on the outside of this fitting, your K bolt, and then you can begin to thread that into your block. So we actually did have to straighten the crush washer out and kind of take the curvature out of the elbows to make it fit. But once we did that, we're all solid. I believe this is like a 17 mil. Yep, 17 mil. So I actually moved it up a little bit because I forgot we're going to have an AC pulley here. So we need to be able to mount that bracket still as well. But for now, we disconnected this so we can pull it out and we can work on getting our coolant lines on. So we've got 4 turbo coolant lines. These are even tricky for me sometimes, so don't feel bad if you get a little confused by the turbo coolant lines. I'm gonna have to say this one, yep, indefinitely. This is the right one for this side because I remember this on the driver's side there was a bracket that bolted here, and this actually goes up to a piece that's underneath the plenum. Yeah, I'm gonna have to say that's right. Okay, never mind. I just realized these are both the exact same hose. That's why. Okay, that makes some sense. Let's go find another coolant line. So our other turbo coolant line actually runs back here, and it pops up and goes straight up to our heater core pipes this way. So I think I finally got this figured out. I was actually missing a line, and I had to go take this from my big turbo kit that I don't think I've spoken too much about. So we know this line goes like this, and it kind of stays out the way of the oil drain. This line is actually going to snake in like this, and it's going to poke in the back of the engine. We're going to take our coolant banjo bolt with a brand new crush washer on each side, and we're going to start to thread each of them in. Now we're just starting them so we can get them roughly in the correct position. And if I remember correctly, these are 19s. Yep. So this line we're going to kind of angle back towards the exhaust housing to keep it clear of the drain line, because I believe that's going to come out here, this way, and in. So I'm actually going to use something here between the two of these while I tighten this down so I can just keep that gap and not like smash my finger. Crush them crush washers. It's good to go. We get to clean up our flange. Now we get to mount our turbo for the final time. Bring your oil feed back up here to your banjo bolt. Since we're actually in place now, I'm going to torque this down, and we're going to aim it towards the block to give us that clearance for the AC bracket. Sweet, turbo is pretty much mounted. So now we've got 4 13mm nuts, at least they should be. And then you also have these little plates with these locking tabs that you put on the back of the flange and the front of the flange, hence this flat spot. And then you actually pry these tabs up on the nuts to keep them from backing off. Because there's extreme heat down here, it can cause it to loosen up and back off from expanding and contracting so drastically. I believe there are options of these with, they're just like copper. So these are super expensive for what they are. That locking tab acts as a washer between the nut as well. A thin wall 13mm helps tremendously here. Sounds like Gabby just got home. Time to go eat soon. All right, let's get the rest of these on, and then we're gonna pry each of these tabs up to a flat spot on our nut, and then we can move on to our oil drain. So we've got it all on. We've got each of the tabs all bent up. So pretty much, I don't know if there's specifically a torque spec. Basically, when you get to tight, you can only go so tight, and when you get it to tight, you can kind of line up that flat spot of the nut with that locking tab to know about where tight is. They're not crazy tight, but they're tight enough that that mechanism will not let them back off. So we've got this tightened. I think the only thing that we need to tighten on the actual turbo is that line. And maybe I should have did that already. Yep, trial and error. It's been a while since I've done this. Basically, I have to tighten this fitting on that other fitting to tighten that line down. Maybe I should have did that beforehand. I guess I'll take note of where it's clocked. So basically we're just gonna tuck something in between that elbow so that way it doesn't touch, and then we're gonna tighten down the fitting and it'll be good. Again, they don't have to be crazy tight. They're pipe fittings, so it's just snug. So before we finish off the rest of this and mount the other side, I think I'm gonna go in, wrap up tonight. I've been out here too long, taking stuff off, on, off, on. Yeah, a lot of trial and error today, so don't be too discouraged if you have a lot of trial and error in your swap as well. So catch you guys in the morning. Now it's the next morning, and we're ready to get our second turbo installed. Before we start installing the turbo, or the manifold for that matter, we actually have to block off both of these ports on the oil tree, or the block for the oil tree, with those plugs that I showed you at the beginning of the video. The correct ones, not the other oil gallery plugs. So make sure you got the right part. A little last check with the magnets, all clean. So now I'm going to take my plug, tapered side in, so that way it can kind of use that taper to start in that hole, like that. I've had some stick out, not really want to go flush. As long as you're comfortable that it's not going to come back out is all that matters. That's not going anywhere. That means we get to go grab us a new gasket and let's find us a twin turbo oil tree. However, before we install that oil tree, we actually have to put our gusset plate on over here, if you're running one, that is. And you have to thread them in almost all the way, at least where you can use a wrench to tighten it up. But you're not going to be able to get the right access once the oil tree's in the way. We're going to take this gasket. There we go. But first, as always, clean it up with some brake cleaner. Make sure it's nice and dry. Now, if you're not running an oil cooler, which is not necessarily mandatory, you don't need to do any of this. You can just use those check valves and your stock in a oil tree. Because here are the valves that we pulled out of there. These are built into the turbo tree. It's not a necessity. We just need it for this bung so we can mate it up here to this and have flow out and back into the pan for a drain. Now we'll put the gasket on the tree and we'll put all of our bolts through so we can kind of center the gasket. And as we place this on, we can thread it into place to secure it. And then we'll tighten them down to 12 foot-pounds like about every other 12 mil bolt on the car. Now for the manifold. So we're going to do the exact same thing as we did the other side. We're just going to clean up these mating surfaces, make sure that they're oil free. And it looks like we need one stud, but we'll just put that in with the bolt like it came out. And since it's rinse and repeat, we won't put you through the misery of washing it. We went ahead and put the heat shield on as well. And let's install our gasket. So now when we go to install this turbo, I'm actually going to have this kind of pre-set up before we install it, so that way we don't have to do so much on and off as like we did last time. I did forget to say, on this side back here to tighten up this line, I actually took this coolant line off because it's straight access and you can snake it out. And then I used a 15 mil to tighten that fitting around this line. And the way I got it tightened, it's actually keeping it completely away from the turbo. So I'm very pleased with how that all turned out. This turbo over here is actually going to have both of the coolant lines pop up here on the outside of the turbo and go straight up. And they're easily accessible behind the battery. If you remove the battery, you get a straight shot at them. So that means this one right here, since the wastegate is going to be towards the inside, turbo is going to sit about like this. So this one is going to loop under and up. So it'll go like this. And then our short one right here will go like this over here on the side and point straight up. New crush washers. We're going to hand thread that in and get that started. And this side will be kind of like the other side. You got to direct it out of the way of the turbo oil drain.
You caught one. It's in the closet.
Really?
Yes.
Well, we caught our mouse. Alrighty, now that my mouse situation's taken care of, that's nice. The other night, I actually seen a mouse scurry across the floor out of my peripheral when I was on my computer, and it looked huge. Well, I'm pretty confident we caught that exact same sucker, cause sheesh. Now, I believe this actually jogs in instead of out. I guess I need to go consult my car, shouldn't I? After a little consultation of the slick top, I have discovered that it actually pokes outwards, which does kind of make sense because it puts it like flush over here with this. If not, it would be way inside. It would probably hit the valve cover or head. So we really shouldn't have any issue on this side with clearance with the oil line and these coolant lines coming into play. I'm happy with that clearance. Plenty of over 1/4 inch between the line and the rear exhaust housing. Heat should not be an issue. You can see these lines are sticking out here pretty crazily. We'll do a little bit of bending to get them kind of closer over here. Before they go on for good, we're going to put the fitting on for our oil line. So here on this side is the exact same thing. You've got this fitting that we're going to put in the turbo that this will hook up to. And this one's far enough away from that exhaust housing that we don't have to have that same issue as before. We can just straight put it in. So now we have to remove the oil feed block from the, or plug from the actual block. And that's going to be this guy right here. This is where we're going to tap in with our 90-degree elbow and have this point backwards, and we're going to loop our line from here to the turbo. And this one is actually a 12 millimeter. So now we're going to look at our line. where it goes on straight, and we're going to thread it to the right one. So now we know that this thin thread or fine thread is what is actually going to go in the block here. I don't think it's going to hurt to put a little bit of RTV on your threads to help seal it a little bit, but I don't think it's completely necessary. I'm just using a 12 mil to spin this fitting around until it gets nice and snug. Now that this is getting tight, we're just going to point it straight backwards. Before we fully install it, I think we're going to partially install the line here. Yeah, we should have no problem tightening this one up. It's a total straight shot, so we'll just leave it on here loose. But basically, this is just going to loop around like this. Final test fit. Should be final fit. Yeah, looks good. So we'll loop this. That's all there is to that. We get to put our trusty little lock washers or spacers on both sides. And judging by the looks here, we're actually probably going to remove the oil line so we can install all these lock washers and the nuts without any stuff in the way. So let's go ahead and do that with all of our 13 mil nuts and then bend all of our tabs up, and we'll be back in just a moment. So it's all mounted up. We actually pulled this coolant line off to get access to put all of this on, and we had to remove the nut from the heat shield to get that 90-degree elbow to go on. So we also angled this up a little more. So basically it's going to point upwards, and it's going to give us more room to clear our downpipes. That way there's no contact between oil line and super hot metal. That leaves us to installing our drains. So we have to get 2 turbo drains. It's going to connect here via 2 12 mil bolts, same standard bolts throughout pretty much the rest of the car. And it's going to connect here onto this bung. So we're actually going to put this oil hose on the pan first before we poke the oil drain here. The longer side here goes on the passenger side. The shorter side goes on the driver's side. And instead of running the OEM gaskets, we're just going to run these ones that came with it, just so that way there's no discrepancy or confusion. And yes, they are authentic Garrett units. 2 basic 12 mils to mount the oil drains. Pop one side in, twist and fit. Bring it down, line up those bolt holes, and start our 12 mils. These are probably like 12 foot-pounds. Now we're going to tighten up both of our hose clamps here and make sure we've got a good seal and that we're not going to have any potential oil leaks. Luckily, these are pretty easy to change when the car's up in the air, like during an oil change or something, if it comes down to it. So now we're going to do the same thing that we did over here and install our oil drain on this side. And we're also going to put this gusset plate in place. So it's officially all finished up. So we did just flip the motor around since we got everything all buttoned up. And I did totally forget to mention. So before we put these drains in, we actually filled it up with about 6 milliliters of water. Not water, why did I say water? 6 milliliters of oil. So we could kind of fill it up to where that center shaft, we could spin it and get it all lubed up. I don't know if that equates the same for pre-lubing your turbos, but we're still going to crank it over without the plugs and stuff in to try to build as much oil pressure and get these things fully lubricated. We did throw on an oil filter as well. The only thing is we need to transfer our oil sending unit from this unit over here. But for now, super happy with the progress. So before we move on, let's put some downpipes on it. So we're running JDM downpipes here so we can utilize NA test pipes. So we just cleaned up our mating surfaces to try to make them as nice as possible, and we're just going to test fit to see if this is the right one. Now if I had to guess, this one's going to be over here for our passenger side. So we need to go grab our other one for over here. But first, let's actually throw on our exhaust gasket, turbo gasket, downpipe gasket, whichever you prefer. Now we got the right downpipe for this side. We did kind of brush this one up as well. Wipe it down before we put it on with some brake cleaner. Get any debris off. There we go. So when it comes to installing your downpipes, you're going to have 2 nuts, just like you do your turbos, right here. Which I do actually have a part number for if you want your nut from Nissan. But those will actually go on the bottom too. And then here on the top, you're going to have these hardened 13 mil bolts. If I had to guess, the torque spec on these is probably like 17 to 20 foot-pounds. I was almost right. It's 18 to 22 foot-pounds. And I was correct about your oil drains. They're 12 to 15 foot-pounds. Now let's do the exact same thing over here. And now we have discovered that our line is actually touching the downpipe. So that means we're going to take that little 90-degree fitting and we're going to angle it upwards more so we give it a little bit more clearance and it stays clear. Just like that, we now can fit a full finger in between and we have all the clearance that we're going to need. Last but not least, we can go ahead and officially finish off this side of all of our installs. And we've got us a brand new O2 sensor. And your oxygen sensor is 30 to 37 foot-pounds. If you don't have one, you're actually just going to need one of these specialty O2 sensor sockets, or just use like an adjustable wrench and put it in as snug as you can. Make sure not to twist up your wiring, feed it around as it goes, and torque the stick. Now, since we don't have all the bolt ups for like our lines, we could just mount this here like this, which we probably will. We'll just have to waller out that hole a little bit with a drill bit. And this technically sits up here on this side. However, I like to tuck stuff in the back with a new harness so we can have this side all free and an absence of wiring, so to speak. So we do have a couple little outlets that we need to put on here. And this one I believe comes like straight up and maybe angles this way, like towards us. Or this one angles upwards. Here are the two pieces that we need. Except we're not going to install them. We do have to do quite a bit of cleaning on these to get these old gaskets off. And we also have to find corresponding bolts for these long, bolt holes and stuff. So we want them to fit correctly. Now, if I was to guess, it's going to go like this. And this one is going to go like this. Before I say for sure, let's go over and check another twin turbo motor out that we have. So we're going to actually put all of that stuff on, even these inlets, here in the next video. Mainly because I've got a lot of deep cleaning to do, and well, yeah. That's going to take too much time in relation to when this video needs to come out in like 5 hours. So I actually have to go in and edit. So let's go check those outlets for you. No, it's impossible for you guys to see, but yes, that driver's side is straight up in the air. The one that points to the side and the fitting brings it up. And over here, yes, it actually points out towards us a little bit to clear the plenum. So we got the representation all good in the garage. I'm happy with how that came out. I'm happy we at least guessed it right, because yes, I've done this 10-15 times and I still managed to forget the right orientation of stuff. Just happens. Funny thing about the slick top is yesterday I went to the insurance office to put insurance on it, because I did get plates for it like a month ago. Come to find out, this thing has been insured this whole time and I could have been driving it. So I'm kind of bummed about that, but nonetheless, we get to drive it, and we actually have to pull it out so we can replace those turbo oil feeds with the ones that we just installed here on Matt's car, because we actually have ball bearing oil feeds on my Z and my green DN1. That was before I ever knew the difference, and explains why I blew my first set of turbos out so fast. They were just spewing oil. With that being pretty much the end of this video, next video we're going to be hooking everything up, completing all of this piping down here. We're going to try to get our plenum all on, all of our water lines routed, which yes, I will go over that, as well as the boost controller hookup probably in next video. Since I don't have any heater core pipes back here, there's no reason to hook these up, but pretty much you're just going to match each of these lines with any hose on your heater core pipe. All they need is water. Do not overthink it, because I definitely did, thinking that the water only flows one certain direction. It's not that deep. As long as the coolant flows through and replaces the coolant that was in there getting hot is all that you are worried about. One last thing before I forget, we have an EGR plug, because Indiana things. We do not need that junk where we are going. I do need to get some silicone hose so we can hook up our boost controller and route that all out, and then we can record that video. So next video, I highly have expectations to get this dropped in the car, although I'm not holding out on it because stuff happens. I think we're going to get this installed in the Z this week. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this series, or have been enjoying the series, because it's not over yet. Thank you for all the support, all the words over on Instagram and Facebook, and all the progress updates on your guys' Z's. It's always enjoyable to see, and I'm glad I can help motivate some of you guys to come together and finally finish these things up in time for our beautiful summer season. Thank you guys again, and until next time, as always, peace.